Lee Flinn, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Matt.
Good. Thank you for coming in today. A bit of a somber topic today, but vitally important for a lot of people. There have been a couple things that have brought me to start looking at suicide and suicide prevention in recent years. Obviously, we've had a very rough past 5 years in our nation's history. But even earlier than that, in this geographic proximity, we had a cluster of suicides with people engaged in the Boise school district, which is terrible. And then one that was just horrific. A friend of mine, she had a friend, and they live in an agricultural area, and a son was messing around with hay bales to take, essentially feed their stock, and hay bales fell on him, killed him. And the dad and mom find the son, and the dad walks into their barn and shoots himself in the head.
Oh,
so this woman is
sorry.
Yeah. And this woman is standing there now with a son who's been crushed to death and a husband who just blew his head off. And she has, other babies in the house she has to take care of. And it's just so dark. It's like, God, how? Right? Like, how is it that this is the human condition, that this is what we're going through? And I heard about the work you're doing at the Suicide Prevention Hotline, and I have friends who've actually volunteered for it as well. It's so meaningful. It's so important. And it's one of those things that can help with that acute moment where it's like, you're right at the end and you're like, hang on, just give me like 10 minutes, like talk to me for a second. And you can steer somebody away from making a decision that is the end of their life, not just the rest of their life. It's over. So give me like a 5-minute overview, if you wouldn't mind. And take longer, shorter, it doesn't matter to me, but help me understand what it is you guys do.
Sure. So Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline has operated a little over 12 years now. And when we first started, that was before my time, but when we first started, Idaho was really the only state that didn't have this type of a crisis hotline. And so what we do is we provide 24/7 crisis support that includes, helping support people who are feeling suicidal. But the bigger umbrella is crisis intervention support. So we're 24/7. We provide this free and confidential service to all Idahoans. So we engage every single day with Idahoans of all ages, all across the state. And it's, it's something that is a support for anyone, anywhere. And so that's what our focus is on. And that's what our team takes pride in doing.
For this type of work, your work is wrapped around kind of taking the pulse of the community, taking the pulse of the state. When things are obviously going very, very well, it's not that you don't have, horrible instances where somebody gets crushed by, hay bales, but you have more durability within communities. When the economy is going well, or when, you're in a season of prosperity, people can handle fights, they can handle problems, they can handle, stressors in life. But when things are not going well, when housing is quadrupling in price, and when the economy is down, and all of these problems, people lose their durability, their mental durability to handle these things. How have you seen that, or have you seen that play out over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I think, the way you frame that up is really what crisis is about. A lot of times people think, a crisis is only a suicidal crisis. And that's one myth that I would like to clear up, that anyone can call Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline by calling or texting 988. And I'll say more about that in a minute. But really, a crisis is defined by the person reaching out to us. And a person in crisis, it's when there's a situation that really impedes the person's ability to function, and that can be caused by suicidal feelings. It can be a person struggling with, depression or anxiety. It can be somebody that is going through a divorce. It can be someone who got a really scary health diagnosis. Bullying, any number of things. And it's important to know, to help reduce stigma, that we are all, I'd go out on a limb and say we're all going to go through a crisis at some point in our life. Loved ones die, loved ones struggle with drug and alcohol abuse, loved ones, friends, family experience suicidal feelings, any number of things. And so you're exactly right. We are here for people. We are here for Idahoans when they're at a point where they're struggling in functioning in their day-to-day. And when a person's doing that, when a person is in that place, I should say, it makes it very, very difficult to support your family. It makes it very difficult to go to school. It makes it very difficult to hold down a job. And so again, we're all going to go through tough times, and, sometimes, people can weather through something, and then sometimes it helps to reach out and ask for help.
When you talk about young people, right, and dealing with school and things like that, there is a lot of concern around our young people and their mental health and going through crises. Talk to me about this.
Sure. It's right now, about 25% of the people that reach out to us are young people. And, we anticipate that may increase in the coming years. But, I would say, the world is pretty hard sometimes. And the strains and the pressures on young people are, pretty intense. So we are a support for people of all ages, including young people.
Have you seen an increase in calls from minors in recent years?
I think we're seeing more of an increase. Texting is being taken up. Texting to 988 is being used more and more by young people. So, I think as the word gets out, I would pause here and say, so I don't forget, I keep referencing 988, and just for those who may be listening who aren't familiar, in July of 2022, 988 became the universal mental health and crisis suicide prevention number, not just in Idaho, but across the nation. And so that was a really big deal. It was intended, it's federal law, and it really was intended to make it easier for anyone, anywhere in the country to remember this 3-digit number and know that, whether you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling grief or any kind of loss, if you're having trouble functioning because of a mental health concern, struggling with drugs and alcohol, for any of those reasons and more, it's okay, and we want you to reach out by calling or texting 988. And so in Idaho, Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline is the crisis call center. We handle all of Idaho's 988 calls. So just for context, that's part of the one of the big changes that happened in recent years. And again, the intention was to make it easier for anyone, anywhere, to know that it's okay to reach out and how to reach out. Before that, it was a 10-digit number, and that's just really hard. Yeah. It's just hard to remember, but and so there's a lot of marketing on the national level about 988. And so the important thing for Idahoans to know is that us at the hotline, we are the local 988, and so we're prepared to provide local support.
I have to believe that suicide and crisis is not a new thing, right? Obviously, 988 comes out July 22. Okay, great. I'm glad we have that. But we also could have had that a long time ago, right? There is a commentary nationally with the lack of mental health and the difficulty people are having. What? Obviously, you can't divulge information about patients, and I'm not asking you to. But what do you see as the driving forces that is it more of one particular type of trauma, or is it a broad spectrum of trauma and crisis that people are experiencing that perhaps is getting exacerbated by environmental factors? What is it?
Yeah, that could be a whole episode with.
We're going to have to do another one. We're going to have to do another one.
I think generally speaking, people call for different reasons. You mentioned trauma, and I think that's that could be a whole episode and would be a really engaging episode. A lot of people have trauma, whether it's due to, something that happened to them as a child, whether it was some kind of abuse, physical or sexual abuse, neglect. Similarly, adults can have, all sorts of experiences that cause trauma. People who have served in wars, people who have been in natural disasters, so trauma is caused by a lot of things. So I would say that we do hear from a lot of people who are struggling because they're dealing with trauma. They might not always recognize it as trauma, but they're struggling. But a lot of people also reach out because something changed in their life, and a lot of times it's related to loss. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a job. It could be suicidal feelings. It could be they're being bullied. Any number of things. So it's hard to say it's just, it's exactly these reasons, because it's a whole lot of reasons. I think the human condition, again, I think all of us are going to go through some kind of crisis. And what we notice when our team is supporting a person that's in crisis, and say it's a suicidal crisis, is a lot of times they, kind of in layman's terms, a lot of times the person feels stuck. And if they're feeling suicidal, they can't see past that. A lot of times they feel like they're a burden to their loved ones. There's nothing to live for, and they don't want to be a burden to those around them, whether it's they don't want to be a burden to their spouse or to their parents or to their friends. So, so there are a lot of reasons.
That is, man, diving into this stuff is definitely, it's a thing. One to your point about a lot of reasons. I heard somebody articulate recently that they're like, look, you have first level and second level loss. And I was like, I don't understand what that means. And the first level, as they were describing it, is like, first level is like you lose a spouse, or you lose a child, or you lose a loved one, something. But then you lose all of these other things as a result of that. And he went on to explain, it's like, look, you lose a child, and that is in itself a catastrophic event, right? But you also lose the large portions of your identity that were tied to that, not just as a dad, but as, say, like a Cub Scout den leader. And now when the den leaders get together to, go out and get a beer after the den meeting, like, you're not going with them, and they were your friends. You're no longer the little league coach, right? You're no longer seeing that dude that you saw at the birthday parties, that like you would go to the birthday parties and you're like, oh, you're the dad I hang out with at the birthday parties. Like, yeah, here we go. And he went through all of these different things that you lose tangentially as this second order loss. And that really opened my eyes to, it's kind of like, listen, we will always experience first level loss, right? That's just the nature of the human condition. But we also, it was kind of like, I'm more sensitive now to the downstream effects and the kind of domino effects of trauma than I was in the past. And that seems to be something that people don't really understand. Absolutely.
I think for those listening who want to learn more about trauma, I think there are a number of books, but one that I read several years ago that I still feel is probably one of the most important books I've ever read is called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's written by a psychiatrist who really was early on, started looking at trauma and how does trauma affect people. And in the introduction to that book, it's been a few years, but I recall in the introduction to that book, he talks about the impact of trauma on this country, on everything from the economy to absenteeism at work to, well-being, everything. And for those who maybe want to learn more, that's one good book. It's not the only good book, but that's one that made a big impact on me.
Do you think that we're experiencing that to some degree in our workforce right now, with people able-bodied people that are not just otherwise incapable of getting or holding down a job, that we're just essentially stacking up traumatic events. I worry about this a lot because the cultural sentiment around our political landscape is one that promotes the feeling of like, this is the end. Mm-hmm. This is the most important thing. And in the absence of you getting what you think is right, we are at the end. We can no longer continue existing this way. Now I have like some people, you could describe as very like Pollyanna, kind of like, hey, I think things are going to work out, right? Like politically is like, look, what do I know about like the right policy? Maybe this will be great. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll be terrible. I don't know. And if it's terrible, then like, if it's only terrible for me, then that's my problem. If it's terrible for everyone, we'll probably change it. So like, no big deal. It'll work out, right? But that's not shared by a lot of people that I share that sentiment with. They're like, that's trash, right? If this comes to pass, it's going to be terrible. And it may actually be for people. I don't know. But we are promoting on a larger cultural scale this idea that every decision is the end. Every policy change is the end. Every person appointed, every person confirmed, every decision made is the end. And there's a mass glob of media that wraps around trying to frame things in that way. Mm-hmm. And that just leads to like this incredible anxiety, and then everything becomes this traumatic event.
I was just going to say that may cause more anxiety, and right. you used the word before I did, but yeah, I think we live in difficult times. And when a person,
what do you mean difficult times? Because like it's not more difficult than it was 2,000 years ago. Like, difficult how?
Right.
Like we're not having 10 kids and then like 8 of them die.
Right.
I mean, not normally anyway, but
right.
Like it's like we're living in a better time, but it's also a worse time. Or like we're living in a better time from like a medical standpoint, but like we have greater obesity and anxiety. Like what is it that's going on with us as like a species that it's like we're freaking out right now?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that.
Come on.
No, I don't think I can answer that gigantic question, but in some ways I agree. I think in some ways it is a better time. A long time ago, our ancestors, there was more challenge in getting enough nutrition every day.
Right.
So in some ways we're better, but in some ways we're struggling more, and mental health, seems to be a more common problem, although I would also say maybe years ago we just didn't have the language around it that we have now. I would say, getting back to, the Idahoans that reach out to us, I mentioned some of the reasons, and I would be remiss if I didn't also say that it's common when a person reaches out that they may be dealing with multiple issues, So I think and I'll give you an example, so someone may reach out and they might be feeling suicidal. And when our crisis responder engages them, because it's really important that the person taking the call tries to understand, what happened today, what caused you, because something happened that prompted that person to call today or to text today. And so in those situations, it can take a little while to understand what the person is dealing with. But in some situations, it could be the person is feeling suicidal. And then once they have a chance to talk a little bit, the person taking the call might learn, oh, you're feeling this way, you're feeling suicidal because your girlfriend broke up with you, or you're feeling a lot of anxiety and you're maybe having a panic attack because you're worried about your grades in school, or, could be anything. But I think, it's, humans and human brains are really complicated. And I think as we all go through our lives, we're going to go through hard times, and it's often not just one thing. Sometimes it's multiple things.
And what do you think that there's a degree of fixation on one issue, like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and somebody says like, I feel suicidal because my girlfriend broke up with me. And then you start peeling back the onion and it's like, okay, yeah, your girlfriend broke up with you, but you also have these other things. These are like the confounded, as you're talking about. So people might have this broad, I feel so terrible. And you're like, well, it looks like this is the thing. But in reality, what people find themselves is like, okay, yeah, your girlfriend broke up with you, but you're also like on the verge of getting kicked out of your house. Or you did get kicked out of your house, right? So you had this girlfriend, you got kicked out of the house. You've been like couch surfing, or like you were going to get this job and then you didn't get the job, or you had a job, now you got fired, now you can't pay your bills. It seems like the stacking again, when things are good, everything's fine. People have enough money to pay rent. You have enough money for food, like you can make babies and move on with your lives. And when things are terrible, it's like everything falls apart.
Yeah.
And those types of like second, third, fourth, fifth layer problems just weigh people down into oblivion. And you get that acute event and they're like, fix this acute event. It's like, fine. Even if we could get the girlfriend back in, you're still like the frog in the pot. You're still in a boiling pot of water. Like there's a broader issue in your life that needs to be resolved.
Yeah. And sometimes there is, and in that situation, say if it's a person reaching out and their girlfriend broke up with them. Sure. And we hear this a lot. My girlfriend broke up with me. My boyfriend broke up with me. I'm getting divorced. The top reasons people reach out are, the first reason is they're feeling suicidal. The second reason people reach out, second highest reason a person reaches out to 988 is they're struggling with a mental health experience. And we do not diagnose. So when I say that, what it means is that the person that reaches out to us, they tell us, I'm feeling really anxious. I can't even go to work. I'm feeling, really depressed. I'm having trouble getting out of bed. So they tell us.
Yeah, sure.
So again, the top reasons that someone reaches out, feelings of suicide, mental health struggles, and then relationship issues, primarily people going through a divorce or a breakup. So I forgot where I was going with this. So it is hard. I one thing I want to say, so I don't leave us, on a depressing note is.
And again, you'll have to come back. I mean, this is really just like an introductory conversation. We're like really not touching on a lot of deep things, but it's a working day. I just wanted to, start the conversation with you. But don't leave me on a depressing note.
I will not. When I would say the work that our team does, and the team members that respond to the calls and the texts, they're called crisis responders, and they're trained, they're crisis specialists, and they come to work every day to support Idahoans in crisis. The crisis intervention model, or the support, the way we give support is highly effective, and not just at our crisis call center, but across the nation. Telephonic or text-based crisis support. In our situation here in Idaho, we are able to support and help a person keep safe, or help them reduce their stress or de-escalate 80% or more, 80 to 85% of the time. Because so many times a person, when they're feeling in whatever kind of crisis they're in, so many times they need someone to talk to. And, it sounds so little. I mean, it doesn't sound like that much, but it can be very pivotal. And it makes a big difference, when a person can talk out loud, and there's a supportive person that can, try to, assess, kind of for their safety. Our number one concern is to help that person stay safe. And, and beyond that, when our crisis responders are supporting a person, they really also are focused on, safety assessment, understanding, listening to what's going on. It's not uncommon that a person will tell us, they don't have anyone to talk to. They don't have anyone that listens to them. And, so it can be very powerful. Another thing that we really focus on, especially when a person is feeling suicidal, is really, because again, I said earlier, a person in crisis, often they feel like they're stuck. This is the only solution is for me to kill myself. And so, our crisis responders will listen, and then also try to kind of pick up on threads of what the person said. It sounds like you said when you felt like this before that your sister was really helpful, and try to kind of help them get themselves unstuck and help them, see that there are reasons to live. Now, we don't tell them that, we support them in trying to, support them in identifying like, oh yeah, you're right. I do, my sister has been really helpful. Or for a lot of people, it's their pet. Like I can't do this. I couldn't leave my cat. I can't leave my dog. Reasons to live. So that's part of what we do in supporting people. And again, 85% of the time, we're able to help that person get to a different place, to a safe place. Crisis intervention, one thing I would say too, because this often surprises people, in a crisis call, our average length of a phone call is 18 minutes. And I say that just because crisis intervention is different. It's not therapy. It's not case management. It's literally, Matt, if you're in crisis and you call and I answer the call, I'm going to support you in understanding what's going on. I'm going to do a safety assessment, and I'm going to help you identify what can you do for yourself? How can you kind of get unstuck and really keep safe? We sometimes will give resource referrals if the person, say the person is struggling with depression and they mention, I haven't been to the doctor in 5 years. That might be something we pick up on. Do you think that's something you'd like to pursue? And then we can help them, if they don't know where to go. So,
listen, I know we're short on time. What I would really like to do next time, if you game with it, is dive into the nature of obligation in preventing loss of life, because this is something that I've seen kind of play out in my life with loved ones and people I'm close with, where a lot of times they feel that the key to a better life is having less obligation and fewer responsibilities and fewer people needing things from them. Mm-hmm. And they end up in a position where they get just what they wanted, which is people don't need them, right? Nobody's relying on them for dinner or for help, or they don't have a dog or a cat that is reliant, whatever it might be, even something as small as like, who would feed the cat? It's like, yes, that's right. Who would feed the cat? Like, who's going to love your cat or your parrot the same way you love them? And it's that obligation that can jar people sometimes out of their own way and stop them from going down a spiral. And I have somebody that I'm very close with that I've seen her go through this spiral, just this downward spiral over the last, it's like 15 years of repeated and more prolonged depressions and struggling more and more. And each time she comes out of it, she leads herself to like, well, I just have too much. I have too much on my plate. I need fewer and fewer things. She loses her complete daily regulation. She has no schedule. She has nobody. And all of a sudden it's like, you're vital to no one. And so then what is the obligation, or what's the idea with you hanging in there? So
yeah, that's a tough place to be. And a lot of people feel like that. A lot of people feel that kind of stress and kind of cycling and not moving forward. And another thing we notice when people reach out is whatever they're struggling with, oftentimes they think they're the only ones, and then they blame themselves, and that makes it worse. Like, I'm the only one that's going through this, or I'm the only one that can't get through this. So,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. I would say for people listening, just know that Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline provides the local 988 support. Anyone can reach out 24/7 by calling or texting 988. And, we're here for every Idahoan, no matter where you live, no matter what age you are, we are here for you. And we hope that, if a person listening needs crisis support, needs some support, we're here. And it's also important to know that a person can call on behalf of another person too. So we sometimes get parents reaching out of concern out of a child, or, person reaching out of concern for a friend at school or what have you. So we are here for you, Idaho.
Well, thank you for what you do for Idaho. Please come back. I have so many questions. And again, I know we're kind of did a quick one today just to get the ball rolling, but let's dive more deeply into this next time. Thank you for what you do, and we'll do it again.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate it.